Who are ya?
It's the Toronto Till I Die pre-recorded match preview.
Hello and welcome back to Toronto Till I Die, the Toronto FC fan show. I'm Mike Newell, and yes, your screen is not lying. I am solo tonight, but really excited to bring you a new episode of Who Are Ya, our weekly look into TFC's match day opponents, where we're bringing on bloggers, podcast hosts, journalists, and our friends from around the league to provide a little perspective on our opponents. So much to get into. Like I said, I'm flying solo, but as you can see, we have a guest with us this week. So your Reds are fresh off a massive 4-1 derby win against Montreal and now start a tough stretch of games that will test their Eastern Conference playoff credentials. First up in that test is FC Cincinnati, the reigning Supporters Shield winners. They're on a 6-match winning streak in the league. They haven't lost since mid-April. In our first game that opened up the season, a 0-0 draw that gave us some glimmers of hope to what we might expect from Toronto FC this season. But to help us learn a little bit more about the current Shield holders is Jeffrey Tibbetts, the host of the Jersey Swap podcast, a show on the Cincinnati Soccer Talk Network. Jeff, thanks for joining. How you doing, man?
Thanks for having me tonight. It's not always that I get to show up on someone else's network, someone else's timeline, and it's great to be here. I mean, how does it feel, really? Talking personally, how does it feel to lean back after a derby win, man?
So it's funny. Our show on Monday, we talked a little bit about it, and it is probably the best atmosphere BMO Field has seen probably since 2019, specifically the 2019 playoff win against DC United, where we scored 4 goals in extra time. I think that it's just great. You know what it's like as well, obviously in your Hell's Real Derby with Columbus, to win those games. It feels fantastic. Maybe I can ask you before I get into my first question here.
Absolutely.
Just you guys have won the derby the last little bit. Obviously, they won in the playoffs to get to the final. Like, how does it feel now that derby is becoming much more cemented in MLS? To get a win off your derby rivals. How does it feel for you?
It felt kind of misleading. I mean, a lot of people will point to the U.S. Open Cup win in 2017 and say, that's the high point. That's the thing that put us on the map. So it's what we're building that rivalry around. But that's already been 7 years in the past. Yeah. We've established a little bit more of a footprint within MLS. And so these games needed to have, I think, some sort of cemented feel to it. I think last season, the big win at home, 3-2, and then a demolition job at Columbus, we didn't look good at all. And so I think it set the table for a really nice derby in the playoffs. Unfortunately, we don't get to face the likes of Columbus at the MLS Cup. And so that's the best game I think we could have really put together. It didn't go our way, but it just opens up the door to even more exciting derbies in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely the Hell is Real Derby is becoming one that is getting up there in terms of the pantheon of derbies in the league and in North America. And this sort of leads into my first question. You partly answered it already, but I want to delve in a little bit deeper and sort of talk about FC Cincinnati in terms of the overall sports landscape in the city. This is a question I like to ask all our guests because I think here in Toronto, we sometimes get very Toronto focused on our team, and it happens in a lot of other MLS markets as well, but I find it particularly so in Toronto. But I want to get your sort of take on FC Cincinnati in the city, but also you talked a little bit about that 2017 U.S. Open Cup run and how that all went and the win against Columbus. How would you describe now FC Cincinnati in the MLS era since that time?
Good set of questions there. I mean, really, from day one, I really feel that this city embraced what FC Cincinnati had set up for them. They had a really good front office culture, a really good supporter culture that I feel grew very organically once the team was able to set its sort of its claws into the landscape of the city. At the time, there was a lot of, I think, a desire for a team to win, a team to support, a team to be, I think, free flowing with. I mean, you had the Reds who, for the longest time, really weren't showing up, and the front office personally was like, "Well, where else you're going to go?" And
Hmm.
I think a lot of people in town took that personally, and they, especially after that was said, I think a lot of people said, well, we've got FC Cincinnati. We've got a brand new coach. We've got an MVP candidate. We've got a team that's finally made the playoffs. And I just think a lot of things have fallen into place. Now, of course, since then, the Bengals have been much better. I really think that there is a good partnership between the Bengals and FC Cincinnati in terms of the color scheme, in terms of players showing up from both sides to the other's games. And I really feel that with the Bengals performing to more expectation, that it's really made this town, I think, understand the idea of teamwork. And so FC
Okay.
Cincinnati fits in there. The Bengals fit in there. The Reds are starting to fit in there, but I think they still have a ways to go.
For sure. And I was going to actually ask about the Reds because I think we were talking about this offline. I'm a bit of a baseball guy as well. But the atmosphere in TQL seems really great, but obviously you were at a different stadium before the University of Cincinnati. Like what has been, have you seen a sizable difference in sort of the atmosphere since you guys have moved into TQL in this beautiful stadium?
I think that the difference that you see has been replaced by other notable aspects. I really think that we were fortunate to have a very sizable place like Nippert Stadium where you were able to get 35,000, 36,000 people into an entire stadium. And if you sell it out, you've got 36,000 screaming fans putting a lot of pressure onto the opposition. I think we saw a lot of that in 2017 during the US Open run. You saw fans coming in and really getting behind big names and not so big names as well. I really think that Nippert was good because it allowed players like Jimmy McLaughlin, Danny Koenig, even to some extent Emmanuel Ledesma, who didn't quite have MLS caliber resumes, plant their seed there at Nippert Stadium and have 35,000 people screaming their name. So I feel that that was something good about Nippert Stadium. Now, the move to TQL, I feel, is a little different. It's a smaller crowd, but I feel that the smaller crowd still gives you that volume. It's been designed in such a way that 25,000 people are still cheering as loudly as 35,000 could give you. And they were able to fit 513 more people into a 25,000 seat stadium to make it 513, the area code of Cincinnati, which is kind of unique in itself.
Yeah.
But it's a stadium that I feel is perfectly sized for the type of fan that wants to come and see a very exciting game.
Excellent, excellent. And I'm going to go just really quickly because this is just sort of just something that's intrigued me in terms of what you've been saying about the history of the club coming from USL into MLS. Obviously, in a lot of ways, the way that Toronto FC is rebuilding, a lot of the steps that we're taking, and we talked about this on your show when I was on at the beginning of the season. We've kind of tried to model what you've done at FC Cincinnati in terms of trying to rebuild this roster. Obviously, the beginnings in MLS were tough. And then you found Pat Noonan, you found a really great system, you found an MVP candidate, like you said, in Lucho Costa, and you won the Shield. As somebody who has lifted the supporter shield in front of their own supporter group before, what was that like on the day that you actually clinched it here in Toronto? So, well, you hold that over us. But what was it like sort of going through that struggle at the beginning of your MLS sort of life and then seeing that sort of fruition come through with a supporter shield win?
I think this has a personal answer and probably more of a I guess a populated answer.
Oh, we love both. Go for it.
Personally, it felt really good for me because I used to live in New England. I was a Bostonian guy. You might be able to hear it in the accent sometimes. But for the longest time, Taylor Twellman, Clint Dempsey, Sheree Joseph, a lot of great players coming through. Pat Noonan himself used to play for the Revolution.
Yep.
And so a lot of these players came in and we just didn't quite have it. We didn't get to the top of the mountain. And when I had moved down here, that really, I think, weighed a lot on me. I wanted to see a soccer team succeed from day one. And unfortunately, as it was in MLS, you don't quite get the taste of that apple right away. It took time, it took mistakes, and I really think that the front office saw the mistakes that they had personally made, the decisions that they had gone through to create coaching staffs and rosters. They've seen these mistakes, and I think that they finally got everything squared away, realizing that. And now they've got, I'm not ready to call them a behemoth, but I think we've got a really talented squad, a really talented coaching staff that has a lot of experience within there. Dom Kinnear could easily be a coach back in MLS. Kenny Arena could easily be a coach at any team in MLS. And to have them sticking around as long as they have really says a lot about the project and what it used to be from square one.
Perfect, perfect. And again, I think there's a lot of parallels between Toronto FC and FC Cincinnati. One, it didn't take you a decade to figure out your mistakes, so that's good. But also,
it felt like a decade at times.
Yeah,
I'll tell you that.
I trust me. The last 3 years have felt like a decade. But also the rise of your team feels like Toronto FC's rise starting in 2015 and sort of that crest of then winning the Shield and winning the Cup and getting to the Champions League final. That there's a lot of mirrored sort of experiences between the two clubs. Let's jump into the match really quick and sort of just the current form of FC Cincinnati. As I said off the top, the team's won 6 straight in the league. It started off a little up and down for FC Cincinnati, and then it seems like you guys have clicked into gear. Who or what has sort of contributed to this sort of run of form where now essentially you're second in the league with a game in hand, just behind Inter Miami?
I mean, I can give you the easy answer. I can give you the difficult answer. I'll give you the answer sort of like just to set the table here. Our team went through a lot of upheaval. I mean, a lot of players that succeeded for us in the past few years, your Brandon Vasquez, your Alvaro Barreal, your Junior Morenos, they've gone to different pastures. Whether or not that they'd be successful in the future, we don't know what the future holds for them, but they've gone to where they feel they can spread their wings. And so that forced our team to really replace a lot of pieces. But I also think we looked inward and saw a lot of pieces that were available. Obviously, Lucho Acosta, MVP candidate this year, MVP winner last year. He's the motor that really powers everything. He's contributed in 11 out of our 14 matches, 8 in a row. And when I mean contributed, I mean goals or assists. He's been called upon to really pull a lot of weight again this year. And you can sort of see it sometimes. His ankles will be a little more swollen after the games, but he's leading the league in key passes. He's giving you performance. The question was, who would be there to pick up any sort of scraps, any sort of connections with him? I really think that it's come from 2 names that are familiar and not so familiar. Yuya Kubo, who really stuck out with this team quite a bit. When we signed him in 2020, we weren't expecting him to stay around for that long, in my opinion. He didn't quite give us the performances we needed. Granted, COVID doesn't help.
Right.
But from 2020 to 2023, he scored 4 MLS goals. Not very good, but he's also embraced a role where he's able to fill in any spot that you give him other than goalkeeper. He's given you winger. He's given you wing back. He's given you a second striker, a single striker, a number 10, a number 9, whatever you call it. Whenever you call his number, he's there to pick up the pieces. This year, he's already got 4 goals, looking really good. Now, he's not going to be able to play this weekend because he picked up a hamstring injury.
Right.
So that means that you're going to have other people join in. Pavel Buka, who joined us this season, he's starting to really get a grasp of how to operate this behind Lucho. He's given solid, scoring opportunities, giving you a lot of goal chances. he's really aggressive in his tackling, and he's starting to figure out how to operate the offense behind Lucho. And then you've got a really strong defense. I could easily point to Matt Miazga. I could point to Miles Robinson, even Ian Murphy, who a lot of people didn't expect him to be the third center back. But I also point to Roman Celentano, our goalkeeper. He's been really solid this season. He's only given up 5 goals when he's played games, and he was out for, I believe, 4 games. So to have given up 5 goals in 10 matches,
Yeah.
that's solid performance. And really, one of those goals was a mistake from last week. So he's really pulling a lot of his weight. He's doing things with the goalkeeping union that we were very proud of in our USL days. And he's sort of really, I think, been the focus of someone between the pipes that we can depend on.
Excellent. And it's interesting too because you're finding value in the ML Super Draft, right? Celtano was a draft pick, right? So like
Absolutely.
from that, yeah. So definitely you're finding that value there. Really quickly again before we sort of get into the perception part, Brendan Vasquez obviously was a massive part of this team. The last couple of seasons, obviously he's gone to Mexico now. How has that changed the way that FC Cincinnati kind of go about their attack?
I think we realized off the bat that he was sort of the straw that stirred the drink, that he was doing a lot more than just scoring goals. He was drawing eyes away from the box. He was allowing the likes of Lucho, Alvaro Barreal, the likes of Sergio Santos, Dom Baji last year. They were able to pick up the pieces when Vasquez was not directly involved with the path of offense. This year, without him available, you have, I believe, still talented guys up front, but they're not quite of the size of the ilk that Brandon Vasquez has. And hopefully, the team bringing in Kevin Kelsey on this loan, as a striker out of Shakhtar Donetsk from the Ukrainian leagues, he really needed some time to play. He needed work. He's young. He's still got a pretty good work ethic and a good mind between his ears. We're hoping that he can fill in that spot that really, I think, is the missing link between Lucho and the rest of the offense.
Perfect. And, going into the game a little bit more now, I think in the first game, I think we may have surprised you, surprised Pat Newton, might have surprised even TFC fans in terms of not necessarily the shape of TFC, but the fact that Federico Bernardeschi was playing as a left wing back. Like the sort of that seemed to take a lot of people off guard. How do you think Cincinnati will line up against TFC this time around? Now in a little bit of better form, and now knowing that one, they don't have to face Federico Bernardeschi this weekend because he's on suspension, but there's still Lorenzo Insigne. How do you think Cincinnati will go about this on the road?
Well, let me preface this by saying, Bernardeschi has been a revelation. I really think that he has found his spot. And the reason I say that is because that's where Alvaro Barreal was able to move into and grow as a left wing back, somebody who could skirt up and down the sides, be called to pull in a little bit sometimes to swap spots with Lucho. And that's also what we're seeing with Luca Oriano, who is Barreal's replacement. He has a different style to him, but he also is learning how to be an efficient left wing back. So if you need to see proof in the pudding, Bernardeschi can capitalize, can succeed as a left wing back. That being said, we're a little threadbare. I'm not going to joke here. As good as FC Cincinnati have been over the past 6 games, they're injured in the wrong spots. Yuya Kubo, like I said, is going to miss this game. We're not sure if Corey Baird is going to miss this game. He's had a little bit of an injury over the past few. Aaron Bupenza broke his jaw because he got into a fight outside of, performing for us. Alvis Powell has a little bit of a leg issue as well. We think we're going to get DeAndre Edlin back, but I'm going to say that we're probably not going to see him 100%. So he might play half a game. He might play 30 to 60 minutes. So I see, though, the back line being as strong as it usually is. Robinson, Miazga, Murphy. I think you've got to ride those three hot hands, especially before Robinson reports for U.S. Men's national team duty. You have Oriano on one side. Brett Halsey will probably play the right. He's okay, but if Toronto is looking to target a spot, it's usually him that you would want to target. Obi Nwaburo, who is the silent assassin that we have on defensive center midfield. Pablo Buca and Acosta sort of nestled between the two of them. And I'm going to say Kevin Kelsey and Dado Valenzuela, who both of them are 19. While Kelsey is here on loan, Dado fought his way up through our academy, and he is showing that he can be that second striker if necessary. He can really, I think, distract a lot of players by his own form of play. That being said, I don't know who you bring off the bench. It's going to be kind of difficult to fit in pieces. Sergio Santos is not quite the guy he used to be. We've got Malik Pinto, who's a decent defensive midfielder. I mentioned Yedlin. Other than that, Nick Hagland,
well, everybody in Toronto loves a Nick Hagland, right?
Yeah.
He scored one of the biggest goals in club history. So
it's amazing because he came in and I spoke with him after the game last week. He wasn't sure if he was ever going to get 90 minutes again. He came back from a pretty bad injury in the offseason. Finally got a little bit of time to play, and to call his number and have him play 90 minutes last week was pretty fabulous. It was great to see him being able to smile again and really enjoy the work that he put out.
Well, absolutely. You're never going to find a Toronto FC fan that has a bad word to say about Nick Hagland, original TFC draft pick, cup winner with us. Definitely somebody that the fans love to this day. Anytime you hear his name. The last question I have for you tonight is the one that like a lot of our listeners love to sort of get an idea on Toronto FC outside of the Toronto bubble, right? What is FC Cincinnati fan, club, media perception of Toronto FC, both this season and then just as a club as a whole throughout when you hear the name, and sort of, do you consider Toronto FC at this moment a big club with an MLS?
That's a loaded question because we've seen Toronto in different flavors. When we first joined USL, it was Toronto 2. It wasn't the main squad. And so we got a hefty diet of Tsubasa Endo, the likes of I'm trying to remember some names.
Back then, you would have got like a lot
Franklin and Osorio.
You would have gotten Jordan Hamilton. You would have got a lot of Jay Chapman.
Yeah. I mean, you were getting, I think even was Bono. I think.
Yeah, he would have been down there. Yeah, for at least a year.
So because I think Toronto was more sort of academic, trying to get their players to fit into the first squad. I think our team sort of were able to figure out Toronto a little bit better. And so it didn't feel like Toronto 2 was a big team. We were seeing the shadow of Big Brother. We knew, though, that Toronto, I mean, we're not that far from Toronto. We saw the behemoth that was being built up there, especially in 2017 and 2018, when you guys almost pulled off a quadruple, for crying out loud. That's pretty amazing if you're like, penalty kicks away from winning the CCL that season. I think what we see is we see a team that has been through tough times, has seen the bottom of the barrel both before and after 2017. And so I think we understand that Toronto has been a big team, can still have the potential to be a big team. But at the same time, we have seen and experienced Toronto as the smaller club. So it's hard to really make a decision without actually playing those games. I mean, there were seasons, 2018, when FC Cincinnati won the USL version of the Supporters' Shield. There were 2 games, I think, that Toronto put 3 on Toronto to put 3 on us. And this was a very strong defensive team as well. So to have 2 games where we'd have to outscore, out offense a team that we didn't see them as much of a risk in the past, I think that probably scared a lot of fans into not wanting to underestimate the likes of Toronto, no matter what level they're at.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think for a lot of Toronto fans right now, the perception of Toronto is we were once this big club that then sort of lost its way after the pandemic and losing Greg Vanney, and it probably even went further than that, losing Tim Bezbatchenko as president, or not a president, sorry, at the time, really general manager, to take on the presidency role at Columbus. And now it's the sort of only now I think our fans starting to feel like there's a little bit of we're back. Not quite there yet, but the vibe is coming back. And it's funny because you started the show by asking me about how it felt to beat a derby rival. And that's the first time we had beaten Montreal at home in 4 years. So it really, that sort of, for a lot of fans, is the marker. Like, if we can win the derby at home and win it convincingly, then we're starting to make sort of the right sort of steps forward. This is going to be an interesting game on Saturday, because I think for you guys, this is about sort of cementing, keeping pace with Inter Miami, staying in the sort of the hunt for the Shield and sort of keeping that form going. For us, it's a yardstick. We very much see you as a yardstick, and to see where are we really at this. Because I don't think, I think if Toronto FC fans are honest with themselves, we haven't really been tested yet. Sorry, go ahead.
I really think this is a yardstick for FC Cincinnati as well. We're starting to face teams the second time around, and the first one was against an Atlanta squad that we really, had to outperform them in the second half because we weren't ready for them. And then when they came here, we sort of put the clamps down. We understood the system. We made it work. So I think the second time around is really where I think the yardstick comes from. It. Are we able to learn from our mistakes? Are we able to build a better squad that we had before and get the 3 points when last time we only got 1? So I think this is a yardstick for us as well.
Yeah, it's again, parallels between the clubs are quite interesting, and this will be also interesting just simply because, we won't have our hottest player available, right? And what are we without Federico Bernardeschi right now? What are our players able to step up in his absence? There's a possible Richie Larea return, which is nice, but with just Lorenzo, and I'm not saying just Lorenzo, but and from a DP perspective, because his team is still pretty reliant on his designated players, how will this team look offensively? That is going to be an interesting question, which will be answered on Saturday. Jeff,
it's kind of funny.
Thank you so much for joining.
It's kind of funny because we're talking about rivalries and we're talking about derbies. There are so many people in our supporter groups who are like, when are we going to get our shot at the Trillium Cup? Do we get to be in that because we're talking about Ohio? If the state flower, I believe, is the Trillium, why are we not involved in there? We want a piece of this trophy as well.
So can I tell you a story about the Trillium Cup? Just a personal story about the Trillium Cup. So obviously it was played between ourselves and Columbus for a very long time. The last time I saw the Trillium Cup, I think was in 2017 or 18, I think. And it was falling apart. Jeff, like this thing was literally like, it was like literally, there was like the base of the statue and the thing was literally like, you literally could just pop it off. So I don't know if the Trillium Cup even exists. If someone out there knows where the actual Trillium Cup is, you can let us know, because I have not, and I don't think anybody has seen that cup in at least 5.5, 6 years.
Oh, we got to put it back together then. I mean, we make it look better than the wooden spoon that we had for 30 years.
Don't worry, we're carrying it right now, so we'll polish it up for you.
We don't want it either. We don't.
Yeah, no. Let's just mutually give it to Montreal. How about that? not a Bash Montreal podcast. So I'll take any time to do it. Jeff, again, thank you so much for joining us here on Who Are Ya? We really appreciate your insight on FC Cincinnati. Other than the jersey swap, tell the good people where they can find you and find your content.
Well, I mean, it's going to be hard to spell my name and all that, but if you look for Jeff Tebbets, that's Jeff with a G, on X or Twitter or whatever you like to call it, that's where I hang out and do a lot of my just talk in general. You can access Cincy Soccer Talk on either X or Instagram. But for the most part, I run the Jersey Swap podcast, which is a lot like Who Are Ya? You know, we try to get the perspective of the opposition, especially those who are trying to, make their own footprint in either journalism or podcasts or, what have you. So go to Cincy Soccer Talk or CincinnatiSoccerTalk.com and check out all the things that we record and we write about.
Excellent. Yes, definitely go a definite good listen and read. I was on the show back in February to kick off the season. So if you haven't had an opportunity to go look at that episode, go watch me talk a little bit about TFC on the jersey swap.
And we'll have you on it this week too. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
I'm
about to record. I'm about to record my return appearance. So looking forward to that as well. Follow Toronto Till I Die if you haven't already. For all the listeners out there, you know where to find us. We're on Instagram, TTID Show. Search Toronto Till I Die to find our podcast feeds, our YouTube links for all of our shows. And if you haven't already, rate and review Toronto Till I Die on Apple Pod and Spotify. For me, Mike Newell, and for Jeff Tebbets, this has been Who Are You? We'll see you next week. Cheers, everybody.
Who are ya?
It's the Toronto Till I Die pre-recorded match preview.